Hello, everybody. San here, engineer, MBA, and investor. And in today's special video, we have Gene Investing with Anthony back on our channel to talk about specifically HAE data from NTLA Therapeutics. We kind of covered it last week. We went all over the place there. We're talking about the company, even CRISPR as a whole. And I thought myself, you know what? There's a lot of appetite to understand the data, to understand what this science is all about. And I've always said this in this channel and on X. Data is what matters to me. It's not the stock price. It's not, what's the cash in the balance sheet specifically, although those are important factors, obviously. But to me, the data is everything to me. That's the mentality I had coming to this space, and that's still the mentality I have right now. So, Anthony, thanks for joining. Anything you want to talk about before we head into this concerning last week's video?
No, I think it'll be good just to focus on the HAE, hit it hard, and not be all over the place. I think it'll be good. I know we're on a time constraint.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, last week we talked about both programs, not just HAE. We talked about NextZ, but after that video, I told myself, you know what? Let's dive right into just HAE. Start from phase one all the way to current status of that program. Now, I know you posted a bunch of things on X on this in the past. This is nothing new for you, but I think it's good for our viewers here on YouTube. A lot of them don't even use X. I've said that in last week's video too. Um, and I told myself, you know what? Let's dive into phase one data. Let's talk about it on a high level, but also to go a little bit granular as well and kind of try to understand why this program is so special and why we believe 2027 could be a commercial launch for HAE for NTLA Therapeutics. So I'll give it to you, the floor here. How do you want to go about that? Like, so phase one data, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Like, how do you want to tackle that?
So yeah, phase one data had 25 milligram, 50 milligram, 75 milligram. So three different dose levels. Uh, it was like perfection, basically. It was only 10 patients. Um, there was only two attacks out of all 10 patients that were actually written down. We talked a little bit last time. One of them was a sports injury, like some kind of, the doctor didn't even know for sure if it was just the swelling from the injury or actually the angioedema, but they had to count it. Just, that's how it works. You kind of have to count it when you're not 100% positive, even though it's pretty certain. So that was one of them. That was in the 25 milligram dose, the small dose. And then there was one other one we talked about last time at the 75 milligram dose, which is the highest dose. And that person they described on an earnings call was getting proposed to up on an airplane. It seemed like it was a big, like heightened emotional state. And most people don't realize the disease has a lot of like psychology behind it. Um, those kind of moments can sometimes trigger something like that. So really, it's like one attack, because I don't think we should count the sports injury. So pretty perfect, basically like 99% attack rate reduction. They give you different. If you talk to people online, they'll say, "Oh, it was 90% or it was 85%." That's based on different time points. Who cares if it was 90% for the first 2 months? What we really care about, it was 99% for the first whatever, 3, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. We care about the longer term. Um, and that's, you can't get much better than that. One attack in 10 people. So the problem was that set expectations kind of high, obviously, because you can't do really better than that. Um, and then phase two, they took forward the 25 milligram and the 50 milligram, the two smaller doses, um, and it added a placebo. So also it made them wash out of their current prophylactic medication. So those are the two main differences between phase one and phase two. Phase one, there was no placebo, so everyone knew they got the drug. Big difference. And then the other one, they were allowed to stay. There was no washout of their current medication. Eventually, they weaned themselves off of it um, at various time points. Um, some of them didn't even have it to begin with. I can't remember the breakdown of those 10 patients, but I think a few of them didn't even have um, that medication to start with. But a lot of them did, and they, at different time points, got off of their previous medication. If anyone looks at the data, they can see they mention where each patient stops using the previous medication. So that's a big difference. I think we've seen. I briefly mentioned it last time. Um, how we see this even in like ATTR, where if you're able to have multiple medications, you're seeing some better results. Like with the polyneuropathy data that we just saw, that was really good. The first 12 months, the patients that were already on the leading drug from Alnylam performed really well for the first 12 months. Because I think it's kind of like a double acting. You're getting two medications that are really, even though they weren't taking them at the same time, you were kind of leading into each other. And I think that helps the system perform better, you know, with the outcomes. So you're seeing that across a lot of these diseases. So the washout and the psychology behind not knowing for sure if you got the drug makes a big difference. Um, there were 10 patients at the 25 milligram dose in phase 2, 11 at the 50 milligram dose, which is the really important dose because that's what they took forward in phase 3, and 6 placebo. You have any questions on any of that?
So let me ask you this for the phase two one. So phase one,
Mm-hmm.
I was very involved with that. I remember when they released that data. I still remember the feeling in the community for it. Um, I feel like phase two, to be fair with you, the data like kind of and obviously there's so many variables here, and we kind of touched upon it last week as well. Um, I think the data was great. I think it was really good. Um, but why do you think it didn't get that much attention? Or maybe I'm wrong. Did it get that much attention? And is it really just because we're in a bear market? Is it just as simple as that? Could be very well
So,
it, be it.
so the expectations were basically perfection because of the phase 1. So it set the bar like crazy high. People didn't really understand the placebo would by itself make it a little tougher, and the washout of the previous medication, right? So like being able to be as good as phase 1 was going to be very difficult. Um, I you have a lot of the people invested in other companies or people that just simply don't like gene editing. Want they expect them to be perfect, or they're gonna poo-poo the data, and talk bad about it. Um, what none of them realize, because none of them actually listen to the like earnings calls and the doctors that joined the company on the call, not a single attack in the phase 2, at least at the 50 milligram. I would have to get confirmation if they meant the 25 and the 50, but 50 is what we really care about. And they said not a single attack was visible, not a single attack. Now that phase 1, there was one attack that I guess was visible up on the airplane.
Yeah.
Basically, is what they sounded like. But people don't understand how these trials work in HAE. I briefly talked about it last time. You know, the patients are told by the doctors you need to treat something immediately um, at the first sign of like an itchy throat or anything. And when you don't know that you got the actual drug because there's a placebo now involved in phase 2, you're going to think about your disease a little differently. Um, and I think especially something most people don't talk about, since this is only dosed one time, it's kind of a rare thing. Usually in a placebo trial, you're at least taking something every day or every week. And I think there is kind of a placebo effect in that, oh, you're taking something, so you think you must be helping you, even if you know in the back of your head there is a placebo and maybe this isn't the real drug, you at least think, oh, I'm doing something to maybe help myself, maybe, right? But when you're doing a gene editing thing and it's just one time, it I think that might play a little bit of a role. But more importantly, we need to see when it's unblinded, right? Once the patients know that they actually received it, the not just the company, but the doctors that are a part of the trial said that these patients are going to think about their disease differently, and they fully expect a lot of these so-called attacks are not going to actually be attacks in the
Right.
future.
So I'm showing the screen here that's obviously shown in their investor relations presentation that you shared with me as well. This was from 2024 here, data cutoff date.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this actually tells a lot, right? Visually, even if you don't fully understand like what you actually are trying to look for, if you just look at what's happening here, you have different cohorts, right? 50, 25, and then placebo, obviously divided in three different sections here. But if you just follow each of these patients, right, one all the way to 27, and you look at what happened after the administration of NTLA 2002, and look at the amount of attacks since the administration, and you can tell it's a significant, if not almost disappeared for obviously bunch of patients. And then you look at the placebo, like you're still getting a bunch of attacks, right? Maybe one patient got maybe a little bit less, but look at the lines, right? And there's a lot of severe attacks there with the red darker colors. So to me, like I'm looking at this data, and obviously the last column here, the change in baseline, like you look at that, I mean, like how can you not look at this and you're like, yeah, this is crazy good. Like this is like this is for sure gonna get the FDA's attention in a positive light. Like it's for sure gonna go through a commercial approval by 2027. How can you not say that? Like that's what I'm trying to battle on my end is like, and I understand like these are things I have to repeat, but I'm trying to understand if I'm a if I'm a bear or a naysayer, I'm looking at this like what would be my argument? Is it because the sample size is too slow? Is it because the competition, quote unquote, is too good? Like what am I saying against this data?
So the main issue is that it needs to be very good, and there are a lot of drugs that do various degrees of good already. Um, and the main number that a lot of the people focused on was the attack rate reduction. And because those three, it's 8 out of 11 appear potentially cured at the important 50 milligram dose. This is the phase 2 data that you're showing.
Yep.
And, those three do have a decent amount of attacks that are really kind of hurting the average. Um, and the number of attack rate reduction wasn't, it was very kind of comparable. I think it might have even been a little less than some of the competitors. Um, that's, and we need to be better. Um, to be equal isn't going to be what we really want to be in this disease. Um, being better is what we need to be. But I'm not worried about it at all because the CEO has already said that it's going to be better. I mean, you as a CEO, you don't say that kind of stuff in biotech. In tech or other things, they can talk a lot more bravely, in that respect. But biotech CEOs tend to be very quiet because they need to be. They can't, kind of hint at data because of certain like laws and things like that when data is blinded. So I
Right.
was very surprised how much he telegraphed. Um, he said basically it's going to be better. And you know, if you add these 8 out of 11 that look cured with the 4 out of 4 from the phase one 50 milligram dose, the same important dose, that's 12 out of 15. You know, and that's 80% cure rate for that 50 milligram dose. He's already kind of guaranteed it's going to be better. You don't guarantee it's going to be better unless you know it's going to be better. You
Right.
know, so it really makes me think um, that I honestly think out of these 3 patients that are showing things, once it's unblinded and they know that they received the actual drug, um, there's a good chance, not just one of them, but 2 of them, or could even be 3 of them. But I would be shocked if only one of them changed over to appear cured, because I don't see why a CEO would say that. Um, but the also the good thing is all 6 of the placebo patients are also going to get dosed. So we're going to get a bigger sample size. So it's going to, and they're going to know that they received the drug. I don't know if they're going to do a washout with those 6. So that's the
Right.
one thing I'm not sure. They haven't really specified that. Um, but that's 6 extra. So that's going to help. And they're also dosing the 10 patients from the 25 milligram with a second dose of 50. So they're going to do a combo dose.
Yeah.
Those ones, I don't know if it's necessarily fair to kind of add because they're getting 2 doses, and that's not what the phase three is going to be. You know, that's not going to be the reality of the commercial. You're just going to have 150 milligram dose. But still, it'll be interesting to see. But those 6 placebo are going to be very fair to add to our 4 plus 11. You know, it's 15 plus 6 is 21. So we're going to have at least 21 to look at, plus 10 more. So you could say up to 31 if you count the redose patients.
Right. So let me ask you this. If like I understand we have to be way better than the quote unquote competition. I understand that piece. But and I have seen that before, and again, I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly which program, which company, but some of these programs from other big pharma companies and so on, they still get a FDA approved, even though the data wasn't like extraordinarily good. Like,
Yeah, this is going to be approved. This It's going to be approved. That I don't think anyone, the people that aren't crazy, kind of realize it's going to get approved. They're just saying commercially for them to be competitive and do well in terms of bringing in revenue. That's the question mark, right?
so
And
so
yeah,
okay, so it is gonna be approved for sure, or at least highly confident we are based on the
highly,
data.
yeah, highly
Um,
confident.
but we're not yet highly confident, like not you obviously, but like obviously the bears and so on, they're
Yeah,
not highly confident that that's going to be adopted by the commercial side of things, right? People are not physicians
and
and the
it's
medic.
because
Yeah.
yes, it's because there are other good drugs. There's a good pill coming from Travaris, ticker PHVS, that's looks very good. Um, a lot of the good drugs right now are injectables, and if I would not want to be invested in a injectable. Um, Takeda has the Tecryso. Uh, that's the number 1 drug for HAE in the world, and it's made like, I think it made over 1.5 billion. It was hard to I had to go in and really do some calculations because they do not break it down on their like website, so I had to figure it out. But and there's some other ones that make 400 to 500 million a year, but a lot of these are injectables. Um, the one good pill right now is probably not going to be as good as that Pharvaris pill that comes out around the same time as Intelia. But yeah, I would not worry about FDA approval. It's gonna be based on how we stack up against Pharvaris, really, I feel like. Because as a patient, I just don't see any patient when there's a good pill available and a good one-time uh, treatment from Intelia. Why would you want to inject yourself every month? Or, I mean, there's some of these, is it Hygarda? It's on the screen that you're
Yeah,
looking at right now. I think it's 104 injections a year, which
that's
is
basically
twice a
one
week.
every 3 days.
Yeah,
Just a little bit
yeah,
over 3 days. So
yeah. It's like
so
twice a week.
let's take a look at that, right? This visual here, like just if I look at this visual, like and assume that we make that argument that NTLA 2002 data is not that amazing for it to be adopted commercially. But I'm looking at what's happening out there. Look at the number of injections and that visual, like, and you mentioned tablets. Look at this, like a tablet every single day. Like this is kind of insane. Like one infusion versus injections every 3 days. Like that's kind of like
Yeah,
how like I'm still trying to wrestle through that. Like I don't understand. Even okay, so we've established FDA approval, highly confident, but how can we not establish that argument as well? And obviously we both can, but if a bear is looking at this, what we're looking at right now, what's their argument against that? Like what I'm trying to steelman our argument here.
their argument against like commercial success.
Yeah,
So there's gonna be at least one good pill, very good, um, and there's gonna be a lot of injectables that are comparable, uh, or close enough to where, um, depending on the price. But like I said, I'm not worried about injectables. As a patient, I know the patient appetite for Intelia. If it stays as safe as it's been, that's a big key. Um, and even if it ends up being like an 80%, I think what we got to realize is the phase three is 40 patients plus 20 placebo, so 60 total patients. That is also blinded. It's also washed out of the prophylactic medication. So it's going to be identical to the phase two, basically. And that had an 8 out of 11, which comes out to like 73% kind of cure rate. If we're anything close to that, it, it doesn't really matter. Is this phase two data is so important later in the year because that's going to show you the reality once it's unblinded, how the patients are actually doing. You know, uh, the data that we saw where it's 8 out of 11, that's the patient's kind of guessing
yep.
and treating these. Like I said, not a single one was a visible attack. So um, it would be really nice to be able to talk to these three patients and see how they feel. But I thought it was very telling, not just the CEO, but the doctors pretty much guaranteed that things are going to look a lot better once it's unblinded and they know that they got the drug.
Would you so that's the phase two, the data where we're talking about the unblinded one, that's towards the end of this year, right?
Yeah, because phase one is this month. I forget the exact date. I think it's coming up very, very soon, like within the next week or so, the phase one. And that's just going to be those 10 patients,
Yep.
but followed up for like an extra year. And we've already seen super long-term data on them. So, there's not a huge upside there, but it would be great to see that it's still safe. And that, I mean, that would be amazing if all 10 of those patients, not a single other attack popped up. That would be crazy. um
Yeah,
hopefully,
yeah, I wonder, sorry, just to go back what you said, the
mhm,
unblinded there, when we get data for phase two for those three patients and you tell them, hey,
yeah.
you actually got the infusion there, the administration of NTLA-2002. I wonder, I'm actually really curious. Like you said, maybe 2 out of 3, maybe three. That
Yeah.
like let's speculate just for a second. Let's say it's 3 out of 3.
Hmm.
Then what's the argument anymore? There's no more. I don't understand.
It
There's no
really
more argument.
de-risked it really de-risked the pivotal trial at that point, because then you'd have to just make sure that everyone understands, like, okay, don't expect this to be 100% cure rate. It's probably going to be 70, 73%, because it's blinded. They have to kind of treat things. That's just how this disease works and how these trials work. So as long as the market's not stupid at that point, and understands, look what happened on phase two. It's around the same thing. And then look at the reality. The reality is 90% or more hopefully end up, cured. So we're at 80% based on the words from the CEO. Like I said, why would you telegraph? Um, that would be very reckless to kind of guarantee that it's going to be better if you don't know. He must have some insight, because it's been unblinded now, I think, for a while. So the doctors must be giving them some information.
Yeah, definitely. Like, look, like I heard that you posted some of those clips there on X. Like, there's no way
Yeah.
you're a CEO of a public company, of a biotech company, which everybody knows is extremely risky to begin with, especially in the CRISPR landscape, and you make those
Hmm.
comments. Clearly, you're coming off with a level of confidence that obviously the public doesn't know yet. That will know sometime soon, obviously. Um, I think we're on the same page on that. And I was reassuring to see Leonard talk about that. Um,
Hmm.
can we shift for the small time we have remaining here for the patient testimonials? So I know you brought it up last week.
Hmm.
I know you made a thread on it. Like, what are we looking at? Like testimonials? Like, what are you seeing from the patients? What's the actual word? Like, how do you say this? Like, boots on the ground um,
Yeah.
about all of this? Like, because obviously we're looking at slides, we're looking at data, we're looking at
Hmm.
leadership. Obviously, they have vested interest to talk highly of their program. What are we hearing from patients? Because just a note on that, I had interviewed obviously with Cash Jevi there with obviously
Yeah.
before you got commercial approval. And I have that YouTube video up on my homepage. And that was with Jimmy, and that was an amazing interview we had with them. And I'm hoping to get one of them. I think I should try to interview one of them in this program. But what are we hearing from the patients?
Yeah. Yeah. First, I did I'll probably repost it, just so if people listen to this, they can find it more easily at the top of my page. So I'll repost it. It's on my highlights right now, somewhere in there. There's some FDA, they had an FDA day a few years back, and I copied a couple of those clips, where they had patients trying to talk to the FDA about how serious the disease is and things like that. Then I personally talked to many, many people that I just came across online. And yeah, I mean, it was very interesting. You do, I don't know the percentage really. I think maybe half the people I come across have heard of the Intellia drug. Um, but it's amazing when you come across someone that has lived with this disease for many, many years and they aren't aware of it. At least I would say maybe around three people that I came across once that didn't know about it. Once I told them about it, were very, very excited, and I mean, everyone was excited, except I would say 80 to 90% of the people I talked to were very excited about it. Maybe one or two people. One person was kind of sketchy about, gene editing, which you would expect. A small percent would feel that way, and then another person was kind of on the fence, and one of those people that might just want to see some extra data, some extra safety, and they'd probably come around. They said, you know, but yeah, it was very, very nice. I would say at least 90% seemed open to it, and 80% were very, very excited. Um, and a few of them, I think I probably enrolled a few of the 60 myself,
Yeah,
because yeah, I had a few people said that they immediately reached out, um, to the clinical trial after they found out about it when I mentioned it. Um, but yeah, no, it's crazy. You have people that their parents passed away from uh, throat swell where they suffocated. That's not the way you want to die. There's a lot of ways to die. That's not a pretty way to die. Um, and they have like siblings that also have it. So yeah, I talked to someone that their bills are like the insurance pays over $1 million a year because they're one of the serious people that have a lot of attacks. And it's crazy when you have an attack, it doesn't last a day. It lasts like 3 days. So it's really crazy when you look at, I think it was the phase 1 data. They had someone that had like 10 attacks a month, and then someone else had 14 attacks a month. So those people are essentially never having a day of peace. Like they're having an attack constantly. They're going from attack because every attack's like 2 or 3 days. So it's when you think of it like that, it's really crazy. Now, a lot of those patients only have like one attack, a month or two attacks a month, you know, and a lot of people are like, oh, it's not that bad. It's very rare for someone to die of a throat swell, but it's more the psychology. Like, that's a possibility. Do you want to walk around and be afraid that you're gonna suffocate to death because your throat swells? Like these people have to worry about that every day of their life. Um, that being said, there are some of them are on treatments that are good and better because treatments have improved, but they all seem very excited, except like one person maybe about the opportunity of this drug. I think what it comes down to is payers. I'm not worried at all about the patient. The Bears probably think 20% of patients want this. I'm 80 or 90% are gonna want it. You
Man, that's
know
pretty low, 20%.
that I'm throwing out a number because that's how they talk. They act like no one wants it, right? They act like nobody wants it. They act like 10% of people want it. But that's not reality. Like if when you're living with this disease, you're gonna want the best. But there are things like generics that are coming. There's a lot of factors commercially that it is very important that we have a huge uh, amount of people that want it, and that we have a really good like cure rate. Because when you start having some generics, or when you start having companies like reducing their prices to compete with new drugs that are coming, um, it could really have some pricing uh, disadvantages towards Intelia possibly. So yeah, that's why I'm hoping for 90% cure rate um, on that phase 2. I mean, I think anything above that's just would be a cherry on top. But
I agree. I agree with that as well. I think we're on the same page on that. So for the last few minutes here before we
mm-hmm.
end this video here, and again, I appreciate your time, Anthony. I got some good YouTube comments actually from last week's.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks messaged me as well on X, thanking me for that video. So I think whatever we do, I think it gets to a lot of people. Especially we talked about this last week's video. We said a lot of OGs in the CRISPR landscape kind of disappeared. We mentioned that as well. So I think it's refreshing for some folks to see a little bit of stability. Like you've been in this space for a while. Obviously, I've been in this space for a while. Um, and there's other folks too. So I think this, whatever we do, I think and that's why today's video is so, in my opinion, extremely important. Even though for us it's quite common sense, maybe, at this point, but I think it's very important to reiterate these things because, man, there's newcomers all the time, right? There's newcomers all the time. And if think about it, if you're entering this space, everything's a bear market. And the first thing you see is, well, yeah, competition is gonna take over the commercial space. This program's never gonna take off. I mean, man, you're thrown off really quick on this space. Like, so that's why like the work we do, I think, is very in my opinion, very valuable. I do want to mention here before we close this out, like we talked about this previously here, but what are we looking at for this program now, like going forward for the next
Mm-hmm.
year? Let's talk about 2025, maybe 2026. Um,
Okay.
what are we
What we
looking
got?
at?
Like
Is
we got like 2 minutes. What do we got?
yeah, yeah,
Time.
three minutes and 3 minutes.
Okay, so I'll go fast. I think it's within about a week. We got that phase one super extended follow up. Those 10 patients that have been really, really good. It's been so good, I don't see a huge upside there because we know it's really good. So hopefully it stays good. And then and safety, very important. Uh, then you got the phase two, probably around like September, October. Um, that's the big one. All eyes are going to be on those three patients. Um, Also going to be interested to see how those eight do if they, continue as strong as they were, and the six placebo patients. That'll be good, and the 10 that get redosed from the 25 milligram. So we're going to have a lot of people to look at, and that's going to be really nice to see. Uh, the nice thing, the company upped their guidance. It was supposed to, the phase three was supposed to fully enroll by the end of the year. A couple months back, they pushed it up to Q3. In my opinion, you don't do that. I mean, Q3 is July, August, September. If they think it's going to be September, you don't push it up. You're not going to. So I think we can fairly, with certainty, say it's going to be July or August currently, which is good. I mean, every month helps because that's the first FDA approval. The sooner we get all that enrolled, the sooner we can file the BLA and all that stuff. It's going to be a 28-week data that they need to collect from the patients. And that should be like mid next year that we see the first phase three CRISPR in vivo data for HAE. Um, then they can file the BLA, and it's going to be 2027, sometime in the first half, uh, March, April, somewhere in there for 2027 for that approval. Um, yeah, it should be interesting.
2027 approval. Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's they're on track to do that. Like you said, they speeded up the enrollment process there. So um no, I think it's gonna be really interesting the next few months, not just for NTLA actually, for other companies too, like Beam and even CRISPR Therapeutics. I mean, and I'll end by saying that I remember in 2023, I remember this before Casgevy got approved in the UK. I still remember before the FDA had their external committee review on the Casgevy's program, a lot of people on X were saying and calling out that they would get denied from the FDA. So just take that for what you will. I mean, these bears, I mean, folks can just say
Oh,
whatever they want to just to get attention and likes, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah, don't worry. As long as we stay safe, we're gonna should have no problems with that. But yeah, phase all eyes on phase two, so that'll
absolutely.
be good.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anthony. And thank you for watching, everybody. Again, follow Anthony on Gene Investing on X. A lot of good information. And we appreciate the time, Anthony. Thank you.
You're welcome.